Data transmission. Data transmission is the act of sending data files from one device to another, not to from one computer to another. If you say you are sending file from one computer to another, that would become the whole process, and that will be called data communication, not data transmission. Data transmission is just the act of sending data from one device to another. Those devices can be routers, those devices can be switches. Okay, so there are two types of data transmissions. One can be short distance, for example, from computer to a printer. So as short as from a computer to a printer, and data transmission can be long distance from one computer to a global network of internet. Okay, so it can be as short as from a computer to printer and as long as from a computer to a global network. Factors to consider when transmitting data. Factors or things that should be considered when you are transmitting data. If you are studying the data transmission closely, you should know what kind of transmission is happening. Like transmission is happening all around us. We are having data transmission in our televisions, the cable network, the internet, the telephone line data transmission. So we have all different kinds of transmission, but what is the difference? Why we cannot, why we only receive data in the television and why we cannot send some data back to the broadcast station? Why the television is only receiving the data? These are the things that we should consider when we are studying data transmission. These are the things we should understand. Okay, so there are two main factors. The first one is direction of data transmission. If we study, we should get the answer why we are unable to send data back from television to the broadcast station. And the other one is method of data transmission. Method depends on the speed of data transmission. Some methods are faster, some methods are slower. Let's start and study the first one, which is direction of transmission. And direction of transmission is also called transmission modes, and we can have three types of transmission modes. The first one is simplex. Transmission between the devices can be simplex, can be half duplex, and can be full duplex. So let's understand the first one, which is simplex. What happens in simplex is this, that between the devices, simplex transmission can be one direction only. Okay, so you have a sender and a receiver, and sender will always send data and receiver will always receive data. There will never be a point when the receiver will start to send data or the sender will start to receive data. Sender is by default sender and receiver is by default receiver, and they will only send and receive accordingly. From sender to receiver, for example, from computer to a printer. So in this example, from computer to a printer, computer is always sending files to print to the printer. Printer is never sending us the files that save these files for me or do something else. Printers can send some signals of error, but those are not data. Those are just interrupts. Okay. So from computer to printer is an example of simplex data transmission. Only one direction transmission is happening in this example. We can also include the example of televisions in it, like televisions are always receiving data from the broadcast station. The second one is half duplex transmission. What happens in half duplex transmission? It can happen in both directions but not at the same time. Like for example, the sender can send data and receiver receives data. But when the sender is sending the data, it cannot receive. It can become a receiver after sending data, but not at the same time. This is what this means. Sender can become a receiver, but it is not able to do this. It cannot receive and send at the same time, but it can change its mode. Okay, so in a half duplex data transmission, data can travel in both directions but not at the same time. Okay, data can be sent from A to B or from B to A along the same line but not at the same time. Example is a conversation on a walkie-talkie. You must have seen law enforcement agencies talking to each other using a walkie-talkie, and they are always saying things like copy that, over. Okay, why? Because those walkie-talkie have buttons to switch their modes from receiving to sending. Walkie-talkies have buttons to switch their modes from receiving to sending. So when they want to say something, they switch to the sending mode and they say what they want to say, and they in the end they say over. So this is a signal for the other person connected to that walkie-talkie network to change their that this person has completed his conversation. If they want to say something now, they can say it by changing their modes from receiving to sending. Then you have full duplex transmission. What happens in full duplex transmission? Both directions simultaneously. Data can travel in both directions at the same time, which also means sender is capable of receiving data while it is sending. Means that device is capable of sending and receiving data at the same time. Same goes for receiver. Data can be sent from A to B and from B to A along the same line, both at the same time, means simultaneously. For example, broadband internet connection. One example is internet connection. Another example, if when you talk on a phone with your friend, okay, all of the common ways of communication are full duplex nowadays. Now start with the other thing, the other factor, which is the method of transmission. Okay, so we are talking about the speed now. We are talking about another thing, which is speed, the method of transmission. So types of data transmission, we can also call them. The first one is serial data transmission, and the next one is parallel data transmission. So what happens in serial data transmission? In serial data transmission, data is sent one bit at a time. Okay, so you have a one wire or channel through which you can send only one bit at a time. Okay, bits are going from sender to receiver one after another. Bits are sent one after another as a single stream. For example, sender, you have a one single wire through which zeros and ones can travel to the receiver. Okay, one by one to the receiver. Okay, so this is independent from the previous topic, which was of simplex, half duplex, and full duplex. Okay, our transmission can be simplex and serial. Our transmission can be half duplex and serial as well. Okay, it is not like that if the transmission is simplex, it cannot be serial, or transmission is half duplex, it cannot be serial. These two things are independent of each other. Our transmission can be serial and simplex. Both are the things that are supposed to be there. Now the next one is after serial, it is called parallel data transmission. What happens in parallel? Obviously data is sent several bits at a time. We have more wires, more channels to send more bits together. Each wire transmits one bit and multiple wires transmits several bits. So from sender to receiver you have several channels, okay, several wires to transmit several bits at a time, and receiver receives those several bits. Now let's do this activity to understand both the factors properly. Okay, so you have the question, explain what is meant by serial half-duplex transmission. So name it. If you have a serial and a half-duplex transmission, so what would be happening? So in serial, we know that one bit is transmitted at a time, and in half-duplex, what happens? Data can travel two ways, but not at the same time. So this is your answer. Two-way transmission. One bit is transferred at a time, but not at the same time. The first and last part of the question of the answer answers the half duplex part, and the middle part answers the serial part. Next one is explain what is meant by parallel. By parallel, it means that several bits can be transmitted, and by full duplex, we mean data can travel in both directions simultaneously, in both directions at the same time. Two-way transmission, several bits are transferred at a time simultaneously. The third one is explain what is meant by serial simplex transmission. Okay, serial simplex. So one-way transmission, one bit is transferred at a time. Okay, one-way transmission defines simplex, and one bit is transferred defines serial. Another activity question, which type of data transmission are being described here? So you have to understand what kind of transmission is being described. The first one is data is sent one bit at a time in one direction only. So one bit at a time means serial, and one direction only simplex. Okay, serial simplex. The next one is data is being sent 8 bits at a time. 8 bits at a time, they are more than one. Okay, so it means we have 8 wires to transmit one bit at a time. So it is parallel and in one direction only. So it means simplex. Parallel and simplex. The third one is data is sent 16 bits at a time in both directions simultaneously. 16 bits at a time means parallel, and in both directions simultaneously means full duplex. Data is sent one bit at a time in both directions simultaneously. So one bit at a time means serial, and both directions simultaneously means full duplex. Data is sent 16 bits at a time in one direction only. 16 bits again parallel, and in one direction means simplex. So parallel and simplex.